The history of medicine, from bloodletting to antibiotics. Level C1, Advance. For most of human history, getting sick was terrifying for one simple reason. Nobody truly knew what was happening inside the body. People saw fever, pain, swelling, coughing, bleeding, and weakness, but they could not see bacteria, viruses, hormones, or organs in action. Without microscopes, lab tests, or modern imaging, medicine was built from observation, tradition, religion, and guesswork. Some treatments helped by accident. Many did nothing. Some caused real harm. Yet even wrong medicine had a purpose. It gave people a sense of control when nature felt cruel and unpredictable. The story of medicine is not a straight line from stupid to smart. It is a long struggle where people slowly learned how to separate useful knowledge from comforting myths. Every step forward required a new tool, a new way of thinking, and often a willingness to challenge powerful beliefs. If we want to understand why medicine changed so much, we should begin with a basic question. What did people believe caused illness? In many ancient societies, illness was explained as a spiritual or moral problem. A person might be sick because a god was angry, because they were cursed, or because evil spirits entered the body. The doctor was often a priest or healer who used rituals, prayers, herbs, and symbolic actions. Some herbs worked plants contain chemicals that can reduce pain, inflammation, and infection. But the logic behind using them was not scientific. It was based on tradition and observation. This plant helped before, so it may help again. At the same time, some early cultures developed surprisingly systematic medicine. Ancient Egypt left medical texts describing injuries, wounds, and treatments. In India, Ayurveda formed a complex system connecting health to balance, diet, and lifestyle. In China, traditional medicine linked the body to energy flow and used acupuncture and herbs. Many of these systems were not modern science, but they showed an important human skill: careful attention to patterns. Then, in ancient Greece, a new idea became influential. Illness could be natural, not supernatural. The famous name here is Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine. He and others promoted the idea that disease has physical causes and should be studied through observation. This was a huge conceptual step. Even if their explanations were often wrong, the method, looking at symptoms, tracking outcomes, trying to understand patterns, was a move toward medicine as a profession rather than pure ritual. The Greek model of the body was strongly shaped by the theory of the four humors. According to this idea, the body contained four fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and health meant balance between them. Illness meant imbalance. If a patient had a fever, perhaps there was too much blood. If someone seemed depressed, perhaps there was too much black bile. Treatments aimed to restore balance through diet changes, vomiting, purging, and the most famous practice of all, bloodletting. Bloodletting means removing blood from the body, often with a cut or with leeches. Today, it sounds horrifying, and in many cases, it was. It weakened patients who were already sick. It sometimes caused infection, but we should understand why it lasted so long. It matched the theory of humors, and it produced a visible effect. When a doctor removed blood, it felt like action. It gave a story. The bad excess is leaving the body. In a world with few effective treatments, a dramatic intervention could feel meaningful. Also, sometimes bloodletting might have seemed to help, especially when patients recovered naturally. Many illnesses are self-limiting. The body heals with time. If a patient improved after a treatment, the treatment received credit even if it did nothing. This is one of the hardest problems in early medicine. The human mind connects sabbatia even when the connection is false. The Roman era continued and organized much of Greek medical thought. The most influential figure here was Galen, a physician whose ideas dominated European and Middle Eastern medicine for more than 1,000 years. Galen wrote extensively about anatomy and physiology, but his work had limitations. Human dissection was rare and often forbidden, so he studied animals. This led to errors in understanding human anatomy. Yet Galen's system was so detailed and confident that it became a complete medical worldview. Once a worldview becomes complete, it can become a prison. People stop questioning it. During the Middle Ages in Europe, medicine was a mix of classical texts, religious beliefs, and local folk knowledge. Monasteries preserved many writings and offered care. Universities eventually formed and taught medicine, but learning often meant studying authority, not experimenting. A doctor's status depended on knowing texts, not necessarily on proving results. At the same time, the Islamic Golden Age played a major role in medical history. Scholars translated Greek works, criticized them, and expanded knowledge. Hospitals developed in large cities. Physicians wrote detailed medical encyclopedias and emphasized observation. This period helped preserve and refine medical knowledge that later influenced Europe. Still, the big problem remained. No one knew about germs. Without germ theory, people couldn't understand infections, contagious disease, or why hygiene mattered. Surgery was extremely risky because cutting the body often led to infection and death. Hospitals could be places where illness spread, not where patients recovered. Childbirth was dangerous. Even small wounds could be fatal. So, what changed? One turning point was the gradual rise of anatomy and direct observation of the human body. In the Renaissance, European scholars began challenging old authorities and returning to dissection. A key figure was Andreas Vesalius, who published detailed anatomical studies based on human bodies, not animal assumptions. This was revolutionary. It didn't instantly cure patients, but it corrected the map. Better medicine needs a correct map of the body. Another change was the slow development of scientific thinking, testing, measuring, and repeating. For centuries, medicine had relied on tradition and authority. The idea that you could prove something by systematic experiment grew over time, especially during the scientific revolution. But applying this to medicine was difficult. Human bodies are complex. People are different. Illness changes over time, and experiments on humans raise ethical questions. Still, the direction was clear. Observation alone is not enough. You need controlled evidence. Even before germ theory, some medical improvements came from practical solutions. One example is smallpox prevention. Smallpox was one of the deadliest diseases in history. In some regions, people practiced variolation, intentionally exposing someone to small amounts of smallpox material to create protection. It was risky, but it sometimes worked. Later, Edward Jenner developed vaccination using cowpox, a safer method. This was one of the first big victories of preventive medicine, protecting people before they got sick. But the largest transformation in medicine required understanding infection, and for that, the world needed microscopes, chemistry, and a new idea. Maybe tiny, invisible organisms cause disease. This is where we approach the true end of bloodletting as a normal cure. In the 1800s, medicine changed rapidly. Scientists began discovering that many diseases are caused by microbes. This was not one person's discovery, but a chain of work by many researchers. Louis Pasteur helped show that microorganisms play a role in fermentation and spoilage, supporting the idea that microbes can affect living systems. Robert Koch developed methods to link specific microbes to specific diseases. This was a new kind of evidence, not just "I think," but "here is the organism, here is the disease, here is the proof." Germ theory changed everything. It explained contagion. It explained why hygiene mattered. It explained why hospitals could be deadly. It also created practical revolutions. One of the first huge revolutions was antiseptic surgery. A surgeon named Joseph Lister promoted using antiseptics to kill microbes on instruments and wounds. Before antiseptics, surgeons often operated with dirty tools and bare hands. After antiseptics, and later aseptic technique, keeping everything sterile, surgical death rates dropped dramatically. Suddenly, surgery became far more survivable. This opened the door for modern operations that were impossible before. Another revolution was public health. Once people understood that disease could spread through water and grass, cities began building sewage systems, clean water systems, and sanitation rules. These changes saved massive numbers of lives, often more than individual medical treatments. Public health is sometimes invisible, but it is one of the greatest achievements in human history. And then we come to antibiotics, the title's final destination, and one of medicine's biggest breakthroughs. But antibiotics did not appear immediately after germ theory. First, doctors needed another major advance, understanding that you could target microbes without destroying the human body. People tried many substances, but most were too toxic or too weak. The idea of a magic bullet, a drug that kills the enemy but spares the host, was a dream. In the early 1900s, some antimicrobial drugs were developed, but the true antibiotic era began when penicillin was discovered and later produced at scale. Penicillin could kill many bacteria and save patients who previously would have died from infections like pneumonia, wound infections, and blood infections. It changed war medicine, childbirth safety, and everyday life. It also changed society's expectations. For the first time, people believed that a deadly infection could be cured quickly. This was a psychological revolution as much as a medical one. Before antibiotics, people lived with Postoyani fear of infection. A scratch could kill. After antibiotics, that fear decreased. People took more risks. Surgery expanded. Hospitals became safer. Life expectancy rose dramatically, together with vaccines and sanitation. However, Even in this triumph, there was a warning hidden inside success. Bacteria evolve. When antibiotics are used widely, bacteria that survive can spread, creating resistance. Antibiotic resistance is one of the major challenges of modern medicine, showing that medical progress is never final. Nature adapts. A good place to continue is surgery, because surgery shows very clearly how medicine moved from dangerous guesswork to controlled science. For most of history, surgery was limited and frightening. Doctors could cut out an arrowhead, drain a wound, or amputate a limb, but deeper operations were almost impossible. There were two main reasons: pain and infection. Pain is obvious. Without anesthesia, a patient could not stay still for long, and shock could kill them. But infection was the real killer after surgery. Even when a surgeon performed a technically successful operation, the wound often became infected, leading to fever, pus, and death. Hospitals were full of microbes, but nobody understood that. Surgeons sometimes moved from one patient to another without washing hands or tools because they believed dirt was a visual problem, not a biological one. Everything changed in the 1800s, not only because of germ theory and antiseptics, but also because of anesthesia. The use of substances like ether and chloroform allowed surgeons to operate longer, more carefully, and with less trauma. Patients could survive procedures that would have been impossible before. Anesthesia did not cure disease by itself, but it expanded what medicine could attempt. It turned surgery from a short, violent act into a planned procedure. Then antiseptic and later aseptic methods made surgery much safer. Once doctors began sterilizing instruments, cleaning hands, and keeping operating rooms clean, survival rates improved greatly. This led to a new era. Operations inside the body became realistic. Over time, surgeons developed techniques for organs, bones, and later, even the heart. Modern surgery is not one invention. It is the result of many incremental improvements built on the foundation of anesthesia and infection control. At the same time, medicine began to professionalize in a new way. Hospitals changed from places of simple care into centers of science and training. Nursing became a serious profession. One famous figure is Florence Nightingale, who helped transform hospital hygiene and nursing standards. Better care, better cleanliness, and better organization saved lives even before the most advanced drugs existed. This is another lesson from medical history. Sometimes the biggest improvements come not from a miracle medicine, but from better systems. Another massive breakthrough was medical imaging. For most of history, doctors could only guess what was happening inside the body. They could listen, touch, look, and ask questions, but they couldn't see organs. The discovery of X-rays changed that. Suddenly, doctors could look inside the body without cutting it open. They could find broken bones, bullets, and lung problems. Later, other technologies like ultrasound, CT scans, and MRI made the invisible visible in even more detail. This transformed diagnosis. And better diagnosis means better decisions. Many bad treatments in history were not only bad because doctors were cruel, but because they didn't know what they were treating. Laboratory testing also reshaped medicine. Measuring blood, urine, and other samples allowed doctors to detect disease earlier and more accurately. They could identify infections, monitor organ function, and track how a patient responded to treatment. Medicine became less about vague theories and more about measurable signals. Now let's return to antibiotics, because they were not only a new tool, they changed society's relationship with illness. Once antibiotics became widely available, bacterial infections that had been deadly for centuries could often be treated quickly. Pneumonia, wound infections, sepsis, and many complications of childbirth became far less lethal. This made hospitals safer and also made surgery safer because doctors could treat infections if they appeared. But the antibiotic era also created new habits, and not all of them were good. When people experience a powerful cure, they begin to expect it everywhere. They may demand antibiotics even for illnesses caused by viruses where antibiotics do nothing. Doctors, under pressure, may prescribe them anyway. In agriculture, antibiotics were used widely to support animal growth and reduce infection in crowded conditions. This massive use created a predictable consequence: resistance. Antibiotic resistance is evolution in action. Bacteria reproduce quickly. Random mutations appear. If a mutation makes a bacterium resistant to a drug, that bacterium survives while others die. Then the resistant bacteria spread. Over time, the drug becomes less effective. This is why doctors emphasize finishing a full antibiotic course when prescribed. Stopping early can leave stronger bacteria alive. It's also why public health systems try to reduce unnecessary antibiotic use. Resistance is one of the clearest reminders that medicine is a conversation with nature, not a final victory over nature. Every powerful tool creates pressure, and organisms adapt to pressure. Now, while infectious diseases were being controlled, another major shift happened in the 1900s. Chronic diseases became more important. In earlier centuries, many people died young from infections, childbirth, and injuries. As sanitation, vaccines, and antibiotics increased life expectancy, more people lived long enough to face diseases of aging and lifestyle: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, dementia. These diseases are often slower and more complex. They require long-term management, not one simple cure. This changed medicine's focus. Instead of only treating sudden crises, doctors had to support patients for decades. Medication became daily life for millions of people. Hospitals became high-tech. Prevention became more important: diet, exercise, smoking reduction, early screening. Modern medicine is not only about saving lives in emergencies, it is about managing health over time. Vaccines also expanded dramatically in the modern era. We mentioned smallpox in Part 1, but the vaccine story continued with many other diseases. Vaccination became one of the most powerful public health tools because it prevents illness before it begins. It also creates herd protection, reducing spread in communities. When vaccine programs work well, diseases can become rare or even disappear in a region. This creates a strange psychological problem. When people stop seeing a disease, they may stop fearing it, and they may question the need for the vaccine. This shows again that medicine is not only science, it is also communication, trust, and social behavior. And trust has always been a key theme in medical history. Bloodletting lasted so long partly because people trusted authority and tradition. Modern medicine depends on trust too, but in a different way. Trust in evidence, systems, and institutions. When that trust breaks, health outcomes worsen, even if the science is strong. Modern medicine also brings ethical questions that earlier centuries rarely faced. If you can keep a person alive with machines, when should you stop? If you can edit genes, should you? If you can collect health data, how do you protect privacy? If a treatment is expensive, who should get it first? Every technological leap creates moral dilemmas. The history of medicine is not only about discovering cures, it is also about learning how to use power responsibly. Now, let's tie the whole story together with a simple explanation of the title, From Bloodletting to Antibiotics. Bloodletting represents the old world of medicine, a world where people had theories but little proof, where dramatic interventions felt meaningful, and where tradition could survive for centuries because it fit a trusted model. Antibiotics represent the new world, a world where doctors can identify a cause, target it precisely, and measure outcomes. The transition happened because of three deep changes. First, tools improved: microscopes, lab methods, imaging, and sterilization. Second, thinking improved: controlled testing, evidence-based reasoning, and willingness to challenge authority. Third, systems improved: hospitals, nursing, public health, sanitation, and education. When these three changes came together, medicine became truly effective, not perfect, but powerful. And the final lesson is a humble one. It is easy to laugh at the past and say, how could they believe in bloodletting? But people in the past did what they could with limited knowledge. They were also trapped by their best theories. That can happen today too. In the future, some modern practices may look strange or even harmful. That is why the history of medicine matters. It reminds us to stay curious, to demand evidence, to admit uncertainty, and to keep improving. Medicine is a human story, a story of fear, hope, mistakes, and breakthroughs. It moved from symbolic control to real control, from ritual to science. But it will never be finished because health is a moving target and the world keeps changing. The best we can do is keep learning, keep testing, and keep balancing progress with responsibility.